In this chapter, we're going to begin our study of the skeletal system and the organs and tissues that compose the skeletal system. Every bone is an organ. Now, the bones that you're going to see in lab, for the most part, they're not real. They're fake bones. We do have some real ones in most of our labs, but even those are not like the living tissue that you would see in the living organism. The bones you'll see in lab are dry, they're dehydrated, they're very lightweight. I mean, they've been there for a while. The bones in your body are a very dynamic tissue. They're very dynamic organs that are constantly changing and remodeling. The human skeletal system consists of the bones, as I mentioned already. Those are the organs, and they provide the rigid framework. In addition to that, though, we have cartilage, ligaments, and other connective tissues that stabilize or connect the bones. So again, bones are the organs. They're made up of two different types of bone or osseous tissue. Compact bone is very dense, very tightly packed together. It comprises about 80% of your total body bone mass. Spongy bone, on the other hand, is very porous. It's called spongy for a reason. It looks like a sponge. There's lots of space, but the space is not empty. It's filled with bone marrow. Now, your spongy bone is typically going to be found inside a framework of compact bone. So that dense compact bone is the outer portion of most bones and also makes up the shaft of long bones, such as this one you see here, which is the humerus, the upper arm bone. Now, if you look at this again, you'll see that at each end, we have spongy bone. The ends are called epiphyses. The shaft is called diaphysis, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a few moments. So all bones have compact bone and spongy bone. It just varies in how much of each, depending on where that bone is and what its job is. In addition to the osseous tissue, the hard bone tissue, there's cartilage that makes up a part of our skeletal system as well. So the hyaline cartilage attaches to the sternum, and we call that costal cartilage. Costal means of the rib. It also covers the ends of some of the long bones and others. We call that articular cartilage because an articulation is a joint, which means bone meets bone. And we also have cartilage in what are called the epiphyseal plates of long bones. Now, the epiphyseal plates are what we commonly call the growth plates. But the hyaline cartilage also makes up that embryonic skeleton that we talked about when we talked about tissues and how we don't start out with any bone tissue. It's all cartilage that has to get ossified or turned into bone. Now, in addition to the hyaline cartilage, we have a few cases of fibrocartilage. Remember, fibrocartilage has a lot of very tough, resilient fibers that can withstand compression. So we find this making up the intervertebral disc, which are, as you see right here, these little purple things. So those are the discs between the vertebrae. And also right here between the two most anterior part of our coxal bones. So this part of your hip bone, coxal bone, is called the pubic or the pubis. And between the two parts of the pubic bones, we have a fibrocartilage pad called the pubic symphysis. And also we have, as you can see here in the knee joint, we have little fibrocartilaginous pads that form menisci. Singular is meniscus, and those help to absorb some of the force and compression in joints such as the knee joint. We have other connective tissues that are dense, regular connective tissues that make up the tendons and the ligaments. So your ligaments attach bone to bone, tendons attach muscle to bone. Bones support the body by serving as a framework. So bones also provide protection. Think about where your vital organs are located. Your brain is within the cranium. Your heart is protected by the bones of the rib cage. Your reproductive organs are somewhat protected by the pelvic girdle. So, support and protection. In addition to that, bones serve as levers because muscles attach to those bones, and when those muscles contract, it allows movement to occur. Hematopoiesis is making of blood cells. Your blood cells, not just your red blood cells, but all of your blood cells are made in the red bone marrow found primarily in the epiphyses of long bones, so the ends of long bones, and within a few of our other smaller bones as well. Bones store minerals, primarily calcium and phosphate, because if you hook these two together, that's what makes up the hard part of bone. It's called calcium phosphate. So we store minerals and also yellow marrow. So the yellow marrow is made up primarily of fat, so triglycerides, adipose tissue. And because that is there, we can harvest that if needed and use those lipids to make ATP. I want to go ahead and point out now that I've taken a little bit of the content from Chapter 8 and added it to my Chapter 7 content, because Chapter 8 is really more about identifying bones and identifying bone markings. So you're going to cover that in your lab. I wanted to just give you a little bit of this here with our Chapter 7 as we're overviewing the skeletal system. Now, this will give me the opportunity also to put some of these easy type questions on your test. All right. So when we look at the divisions of the skeletal system, we divide it into two major categories, axial and appendicular. So the axial skeleton is everything you see here in blue. So it is composed of the bones along the central axis of the body, the skull, the vertebral column, and the bones that make up the thoracic cage, which are the ribs and the sternum. Now we have 80 bones in the axial skeleton. We have approximately 126 bones that make up the appendicular skeleton, which is everything in these images that's not colored blue. So it's your limbs, your arms, your legs, your hands, your feet, your ankles, if you will, and your wrist, and then also, of course, the bones that attach them to the body. So we call those girdles. So the pectoral girdle holds the upper limbs, the arms, onto the body, and the pelvic girdle holds the two lower limbs, the legs, in place. This slide, again, is from your Chapter 8 content, but it really gives you an overview of some of the bone markings. So you won't just be learning that this bone is the femur or this bone is the humerus. You'll be learning the different structures, like this tuberosity right here where your deltoid muscle attaches. Or this condyle here, which forms your knee, helps to form your knee joint. So what I will ask you for lecture is have an idea of what each of these bone markings are. So what would you call an opening or passageway in a bone? Well, it could be a foramen, it could be a meatus. Okay, so make sure that you're aware of these. Again, you're going to learn these in lab, but make sure you're aware so I can give you some of this on your test for your easy questions.